welcome to another episode of the Fertility Podcast, episode 184. If this is your first listen, hello, I'm Natalie Silverman, your host, a little bit soggy. I've been out for the last 4 or 5 hours doing a lovely memory walk for a bereavement charity called Cruise, which my mum is a bereavement counsellor for, and we had this lovely walk in a gorgeous park, even though it was chucking it down on and off, for my late auntie Melissa, and there was about 40 of us, all remembering people that we've lost in the rain, doing a walk, and we stopped and read some poems and lit some candles, and it was really special. And grief affects us in so many different ways that I think it's something that should always ensure that you don't have to deal with alone, if possible. Maybe at first you need to process it a bit, but if it's something that you're trying to manage at the moment, please reach out to somebody and get some support, because it's too hard to try and manage on your own. Anyway, I didn't want to completely start on too much of a sad note, but just wanted to share what I've been up to. It's always lovely to know where you're at when you listen to this podcast, so please do follow, engage, chat with me at Fertility Poddy on Insta and Twitter, and the Fertility Podcast has a Facebook page if you've just kind of found me and you're working your way through all the previous episodes. And I wanted to just explain what's going to be changing here at Fertility Podcast HQ, because I'm going to try something different in a couple of episodes' time. So from the 17th of June, I'm going to be sharing with you a show that I'm co-hosting with a former guest of mine, a lovely lady called Kate Davis, who is a fertility nurse consultant. And we had just been talking about doing some stuff together, because this podcast is also going to start going out on something called UK Health Radio, which is an online radio station dedicated to your health. And it means that more people can hear your stories that you're sharing with me on this podcast, as well as the different expert interviews that I'm getting to share. And hopefully more people who are struggling to conceive can find different ways to learn and understand and find their community, find the awesome TTC community that we are all part of. And yeah, so things are going to sound a bit different, but I'm obviously still going to be here, and the kind of principles of the Fertility Podcast are the same, that this is a safe place for you to hear other people's stories who are struggling and to learn more about your fertility, to ultimately hopefully help you start or complete your family, whatever stage you're at. So I will be telling you more about that on my socials, but I just wanted to let you know, because Kate and I have spent a day recording this week, which was pretty mad. And I'm really looking forward to it, and I really appreciate your feedback, as I always do. You can always email me, natalie@thefertilitypodcast.com. This episode today is focused on male fertility. It's a guy's story, a guy called Paul, who I caught up a good while ago now, actually. And the reason I'm sharing it with you is because on the 12th of June in Manchester, I'm part of a male fertility event. So if you're in Manchester in the north of England and want to come and meet a group of us and hear some experts talk, we've got an amazing fertility doctor called Dr. Mohammed Akhtar. We've got Robin Hadley, who is a childless man and gives his perspective of his experiences, and he's done a lot of research. There's Dr. Michael Carroll, who does a lot of work looking at the environmental and lifestyle factors affecting male fertility, and a guy called Jack Broadley, who has a charity called Baggy Trousers, and he has survived testicular cancer, and he has a support group for men who have found themselves with testicular cancer, and he'd been telling me how a lot of men come to him with that kind of fertility preservation area, just dumbfounding them and wanting to understand more. So we're going to be having a really lovely couple of hours. All the details will be in the show notes for this episode, and that's why I wanted to have a male voice on this chat today. If you're a guy listening, or if you've found that it is male factor as to the reason that you're struggling to conceive, I've done quite a lot of male focused chats, and it's not an easy one. Guys aren't that forward, they're not that keen on coming forward, let's say, when it comes to talking about this, but you're getting better at it, gents. There's more of you that I'm talking to on Instagram, and Paul was really happy to share his story, and just I hope that by hearing it, if you are a guy listening to this, you'll find some comfort in hearing another guy talk about his feelings and his experience. Before we hear from Paul, though, it's a quick note from my sponsors who make this podcast happen. This podcast is sponsored by International Andrology, who specialise in diagnosing and treating male infertility. Around 50% of infertility issues are male factor, and all too often, men aren't even evaluated at the start of a fertility journey, which might result in unnecessary treatments, costs, and disappointment. International Andrology is one of the few specialist clinics in the UK offering a holistic approach to increase your chances to conceive naturally or via the IVF route. As well as treating the underlying causes of male infertility, their doctors have some of the highest success rates in microsurgical sperm retrieval. So, if you're looking for a true specialist to assist you on your fertility journey, visit london-andrology.co.uk today and do mention the Fertility Podcast. So now I'm going to welcome Paul Brackley to the podcast. Paul's other half, Helen, responded to a message I'd put in my closed Facebook group, Talk Fertility, which if you've not yet joined and you want to kind of continue the conversation, then that's a place that you can. And Paul's here now to just have a chat about where him and his wife Helen are at. Welcome to the podcast, Paul.
Welcome, Natalie. How are you?
I'm really good, and really appreciate you giving me the time, because what I'm trying to do is to just give guys a bit more of a voice and hear about what's been going on with you and how you feel about it, really. So if you're up for telling me as a starting point, what happened when you were kind of told that there was an issue, whether it had been a lot of tests and then suddenly, or whether you already had an idea that there might be something up. What happened?
So we started trying about 3 years ago, and then probably after about a year, nothing was happening. So we went to the GP and got various tests done and got referred to a hospital in Manchester, and we went to have some further tests, and everything has been fine. There's various limits on mobility of the sperm and various women checks, and it's always been said as unexplained infertility. So there's nothing to try and adjust to or change or come to terms with. It's just the not knowing that it's always been the case. So we've been through 2 rounds of IVF on the NHS. Both have been unsuccessful. Both times we've had 1 and 2 eggs put back in. They weren't the blastocystic stage. They were the one before that, I think, about
3
8
days.
or 10. Yeah, 3 days. And we've never made it to the end of the 2-week wait. It's always failed in the 2nd week. So we've never had the nervous pregnancy test to do. The first failure was put down to poor egg quality on Helen's behalf, but that was just, it could have been that one time. They could be fine again, or we'll just see what happens. So we've had the 2nd failure, and because it's the end of our NHS treatment programme, we haven't had feedback from them on what the cause was. So we're just going through the process now of getting our notes, and then we're currently looking at some private clinics in the area to go and move to. So one of the first things we'll be doing is asking them why the 2nd IVF failed, and then taking it from there.
So is that how it is then with the 2nd failure? You don't even get any feedback?
Yeah, we thought we'd have a sort of debrief session like we did after the first one. So we were waiting for that letter to come out confirming the meeting. But the letter came saying, unfortunately, that the IVF's failed. That'll be the end of it because you've had your 2 free rounds with us. So
ridiculous that means no support. I have heard that there's that drop-off after a failed cycle, but I didn't realise it was literally funding has been cut, so bang, end of, off you go.
Yeah, that was it. Because the first time we went back in and they got out the document with each embryo, because I think there was 17 follicles or eggs or whatever they're called, and they showed us how they progressed every day. They were explaining that some of them didn't go that far and some weren't that good, and they weren't perfect split all round, and you could see it and understand why it didn't work. But this time it was just a text basically off a girlfriend saying it's over. That was what it felt like. Yeah.
So just talk to me a bit about what you've experienced along the way, because I'm always interested in whether you feel in the consultations that the pair of you were spoken to, or whether it was predominantly your other half who was looked in the eye and talked to.
It's always the woman. When we were at the doctor's surgery, when we were at the NHS, even when we've been to 2 private clinics and had sort of an initial conversation with the patient liaison manager, they've all been talking to both of us, but looking at Helen.
Mm.
And I've always sort of felt like a third wheel. And you do often feel like that because your part practically is so small and the woman does all the hard lifting, but it is the two of you at the end of the day. So you do
Exactly.
feel a bit left out. That's just how it is, isn't it?
Well, it shouldn't be. And there's plenty of clinics that pride themselves on making this bespoke experience. I'm yet to hear of a couple who have had that. I've visited a number of clinics and I've had a number of clinics tell me that that's what they pride themselves on. I just haven't heard a patient talk to me about it. So I'd be interested in whether when you choose a private clinic, and I'm assuming that that will be a factor.
Yeah, that's how we're going around. I think we've made our decision, but we've made it on gut feel how we've interacted with them. They've both been exactly the same, both talking to Helen and not myself.
Even the one you've chosen?
Yeah, because they were both exactly the same. So we've just gone with one that had sort of better feedback. It's a bit more closer.
Right, your mission is to get eye contact, okay, as this progresses and feedback.
Yeah.
I know
Well, we're actually going to a fertility fair in Manchester at the end of March.
Well, I'll be there. I'll
it'll
have
be
to catch up with you.
And I'll see if I've made eye contact with anyone.
Yeah, you have to come and tell me. And as far as your experience of the gentleman's room and that whole process, if you don't mind talking to me about it, how I don't mean in detail talking to me about it, because again, I've looked in a lot of gentlemen's rooms and they're all very clinical. And it could be if Carlsberg was going to design that room, it would be very different. But they don't, sadly. They're often designed by people quite far removed from what actually goes on in there. Would you prefer a different kind of room?
Well, the one I went to in Manchester, the NHS hospital, your room was next to another room. So you knew that there was another gentleman next to you, probably about 4 foot away. So that always made me chuckle. Always, yeah. It's very clinical. It's just like being in a hospital bed, but you're just on a chair instead. And it's just very basic. But one of the clinics, they showed us their men's room, and they'd got sort of paintings on the wall, and they made it colourful, and there was some supportive material available in the room.
Very well put.
Unlike, I didn't notice it, but Helen did.
Right.
But it's an awkward experience all around, isn't it? So it's
Yeah.
one that's best just to get over and done with.
I mean, you seem pretty kind of upbeat about this in the way you're talking to me about it. I'm not saying you're taking it lightly, but are you talking about it with like your peers? Have you got close mates that you can confide in?
It's a weird journey because from the beginning, the experience I've had with Helen and people we've spoken to that have also gone through it, from as soon as you realise there's a problem, the woman starts looking at various blogs and Googling this and having a look online at that and start getting books, and they're a long way ahead of the men, and the men sort of catch up and take their time getting to the same page. But we've always spoken about it. We're open and honest. I've actually, because I had a bit of a tough year with some other things happening last year, I went to counselling, and that was quite useful, talking to a neutral person. But we're open and honest with our family, closest friends. But it does feel like a taboo subject with the wider world. It is always awkward having that first conversation with someone, because they don't know, unless they've gone through it themselves, they don't know what on earth infertility is or what's involved, and what emotional, physical strain you go through each cycle. But yeah, we're lucky. We've got a sort of close-knit group of friends and family we can confide in. Yeah.
As far as going through treatment and sadly having failed treatment, I mean, self-preservation is key with all of this, and you don't necessarily, even though you've got, like you've said, a close circle around you, you don't necessarily want them asking questions the whole time if you are having failures. How do you manage that?
Well, the first one, you don't know what on earth it's like. It's just a completely new experience. So we didn't really tell anyone, because we didn't feel like we should, because we didn't want the pressure, and we don't want family always going, oh, what's happening, because we didn't know what was going to happen. But we did tell someone, and they did ask every day. So then the next time we decided to tell all our friends and family that it's going on, but not the details of it, just that they were aware. But we didn't tell that girl that always asked every day. We didn't tell her again.
You have to choose quite wisely, I think, what information you share for that reason, because it does become all of what you're about to some people, and that's not really what you need when you know that it's such. You have to be so patient. And are you giving yourself some time before starting a third cycle?
Yeah, because we feel it might be the egg quality. We're not changing our diet as such, because we've done that over the last few years, but we're just trying different sort of dietary changes, just sort of little tweaks.
Sure.
Things that you read online, like flax seeds, and can't tell you how many avocados I've had over the last 3 years.
Okay.
But Helen, she tried Reiki, and now she's trying acupuncture.
Okay.
So we're just giving it a few months, mainly for the drugs to leave her body.
Sure.
And then hopefully this bit of dietary change will help. And then, because it says 90 days to improve your egg quality. So we failed last month. So probably give it another couple of months and look to do in the summer again.
Well, I've had some really interesting chats with kind of nutritionists and talking about changes that can be made, and ultimately you wouldn't play Wimbledon unless you were match fit, and you kind of want to have that mentality, don't you, and be the best that you can, and especially now as you're self-funding, you don't want to be rushed into it. So that's really wise. And I had acupuncture, and I'm a big believer in that whole holistic approach, complementing what you're doing to give yourself that peace of mind that you're giving yourself a bit of time out from everything.
The approach we've taken as well is that it's not, our life isn't all about this, that when we do our next round, we'll probably take 2-3 months of not drinking.
Yeah.
But we know we've got a couple of stag do's and hen do's coming up, and Helen's best friend's getting married, so we want to make sure we can enjoy those occasions and plan IVF around it rather than planning our life around IVF.
Yeah. And I think that again is such a good piece of advice. Like, we went skiing, and I've never been, and it was one of those, what if I'm pregnant at that point? And we decided to go. A group of friends were going. We went, and I'm delighted that I've got to go, because since becoming a parent, it's not happened. And I think you're absolutely right that life has to carry on as much as possible. Otherwise, you'll regret. And it does, as I've talked to a number of people again on this podcast, that it's become all consuming, and it affects your mental health. And you need to stay as positive as you can.
Yeah, because I remember 3 years ago we were going to Amsterdam, and we were starting to try 2 months before. And I remember we were lying on a beach and we were saying, oh, like, really positive, let's start trying for a baby. And then we were like, oh, we're going to Amsterdam in a few weeks and staying at a friend's house. What if we're pregnant? Oh, we're going to have to get a hotel nearby and pretend that we can't drink and this, that and the other. And then when it doesn't happen, you just think, oh, why do I bother about it? Let's just enjoy as much as I can. Because like we've been to Australia last year, we went to Las Vegas. We just want to make sure that we don't look back and we haven't put our life on hold for 4 or 5 years or however long it may be. Because one of Helen's friends, she was trying for a few years, and she just said that they just put everything on hold and put all they could into it. She was like, looking back, I wish we'd been to Paris for the weekend or to the Lake District or just enjoyed ourselves a bit more.
Yeah, so I think it's finding the right balance for you, and I think it's like you've just described, you've got to find that place that suits you both. That if you don't want to drink and the other does, and you know, there's so many different pieces of information about what's the best thing to do. And I mean, like I say, I've spoken to various dietary experts about the myths around male and female fertility issues and what's best, and you decide what's right for you. Well, look, best of luck, Paul. And I hope that find that eye contact that I've set you the challenge for, and I want you to keep in touch. And I want you to try and sneak a selfie. No, I'm joking. I think you're doing all the right things, giving yourself that kind of time out as well in between. So good luck with it all. And thank you for chatting about what's gone on so far.
No problem. Thank you very much.
Oh, bless Paul. And I have to tell you that since talking, I had got in touch with Paul and Helen to find out how they were doing and where they were at. And they've just had a baby in April. So this episode is coming to you in June 2019. So their third round of IVF was successful, which is great news, isn't it? And if you're listening to this and want to hear more male-related stories, please have a look at thefertilitypodcast.com, and there's a button that says male infertility on it. Also, I'll put a link in the show notes for this episode, which are thefertilitypodcast.com/man talk, about the male fertility event that I mentioned at the start of this episode. It's happening in Manchester on the 12th of June, where you can come and meet some fertility experts and meet other people who are wanting to get their heads around this and just kind of meet face to face, because it is amazing, the online community that we've got, but it is also fab to meet in person. And that's what Talk Fertility is, this group of us in Manchester who are putting on more events. So like I say, all the details will be in the show notes. I hope you found this useful, and don't forget as well that I did say things are going to be changing on this podcast, so do keep listening. If you haven't already subscribed, you can do that via your favourite podcast app, and it's ace to get your thoughts, so you can just rate and review it, and then I know that you're liking the content that continues to come from Fertility Podcast HQ. Right, that's me for now. I'm off to Brighton to make a very interesting podcast series that I will be sharing more with you. So until the next time,